Hello, you're watching A News Morning from Baku. I'm Bakhtiar Sanov, and let's see the headlines. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons urged an investigation into the use of chemical weapons in Syria. The Biden administration approves another military aid package for Ukraine. Elon Musk becomes the first person in history to achieve a net worth exceeding $400 billion. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons is urging an investigation into the use of chemical weapons in Syria. The organization plans to call on Syria's new leadership to grant access for investigators to continue uncovering those responsible for attacks that left thousands dead or injured during the civil war.
The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons held a closed-door session with its 41-member Executive Council. The meeting focused on addressing the situation in Syria after the sudden toppling of President Bashar al-Assad. OPCW Director General Fernando Arias noted positive signals from Syria about addressing its chemical weapons, but said no formal commitments had been made. Syria joined the OPCW in 2013 under a US-Russia deal to dismantle its chemical arsenal. According to the UN and OPCW investigations, banned weapons remain in Syria, and Assad's forces were found to have repeatedly used sarin and chlorine bombs. The OPCW, based in the Netherlands, enforces the 1997 Chemical Weapons Convention. It helped dismantle Syria's chemical arsenal, much of it neutralized on a specialized US ship. The OPCW seeks Syria's cooperation to eliminate chemical weapons and ensure accountability for their past use.
With curfews lifted, Syria sees a resurgence in commerce as markets reopen and independent currency trading becomes legal under the transitional government.
Shops across Damascus now openly advertise money exchange services, marking a significant shift from earlier restrictions. The historic Ahmadiyya Bazaar, closed during recent turmoil, has reopened, reflecting a cautious return to normality. Syria's transitional government, led by Mohammed al-Bashir, is steering the country towards a free market economy. Efforts include easing financial regulations, stabilizing inflation, and encouraging the return of displaced Syrians. These changes aim to rebuild a nation recovering from years of conflict and economic strain. Once punishable by law, independent currency trading is now widespread. In downtown Damascus, businesses display signs offering currency exchange for various denominations, catering to locals and traders alike. The Syrian pound, which once stood at 50 to the dollar before 2011, now trades at 15,000, illustrating the economic challenges ahead. Economists see reopening markets and new financial freedoms as vital steps to attract investment and encourage economic recovery. The streets of Damascus, now adorned with flags symbolizing the interim government, showcase a nation striving for stability amid significant change.
The Biden administration has announced a new weapons aid package for Ukraine, White House spokesperson John Kirby said without disclosing the details. Kirby emphasized that the United States would continue supporting Ukraine with aid packages throughout Biden's term. Last month, President Biden lifted the U.S. ban on Ukraine, using longer-range missiles for strikes within Russia, aiming to strengthen Kiev's defense efforts amid the ongoing conflict with Moscow.
That also today the President approved a new security assistance package for Ukraine that will provide them with additional air defense, artillery, drones, and armored vehicles. It's the 72nd such drawdown package announced by the United States, and as the President made clear, we're going to continue to provide additional packages right up to the end of this administration.
In Berlin, European foreign ministers talked about long-term security guarantees and military support for Ukraine. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock called for strong security guarantees for Ukraine and emphasized the need for European countries to be united. During her address, Baerbock underscored the importance of preserving Ukraine's agency in peace negotiations. She said no peace will be achieved over the heads of Ukrainians, referencing her recent visit to Ukraine. She also emphasized that today's discussions represent a renewed and strong signal of unity to safeguard peace across Europe.
Hier in diesem Kreis sind wir uns einig.
Here in this circle, we are united in agreeing that Ukraine needs strong security guarantees. We, as Europeans, also need strong security guarantees that show no cracks. This includes long-term military and financial support for Ukraine. As mentioned, we will discuss this option in greater depth today. It is clear that we must not only think big for our common security, but also act big and provide the necessary tools for that. With France, Poland, Italy, Spain, the UK, and the High Representative of the European Union, we are sending a clear message. We stand for the security and future of our European continent.
NATO's Secretary-General Mark Rutte warns that the security situation doesn't look good and calls for an increase in defense spending. Meanwhile, NATO members are in talks to raise the alliance's defense spending to 3% of GDP, up from the current 2%, according to the Financial Times.
NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte warned that NATO must prepare for long-term confrontations with Russia and said the alliance is not ready for the challenges ahead. In his speech in Brussels, Rutte urged a shift to a wartime mindset, emphasizing the need to increase defense spending to counter Russia's growing military strength.
And Russia's defense industry is producing huge numbers of tanks, armored vehicles and ammunition. What Russia lacks in quality, it makes up for in quantity, with the help of China, Iran and North Korea. This all points in one clear direction. Russia is preparing for long-term confrontation. We can prevent the next big war on NATO territory and preserve our way of life. This requires us all to be faster and fiercer. It is time to shift to a wartime mindset and turbocharge our defense production and defense spending.
The discussions will continue as NATO plans for its upcoming summit next June. European NATO members are in talks to raise defense spending to 3% of GDP, up from the current target of 2%, Financial Times reports. The urgency for this increase has been driven by Donald Trump's demands and the realization that current defense spending is insufficient to support Ukraine and deter Russia. The talks, which started at a NATO foreign ministers meeting last week, propose a short-term commitment to reach 2.5%, with a long-term goal of 3% by 2030.
In the largest single-day act of clemency in modern U.S. history, President Joe Biden pardoned 39 Americans convicted of nonviolent crimes and commuted the sentences of roughly 1,500 people. Biden is reportedly also considering preemptive pardons for officials and allies who the White House fears could be unjustly targeted by President-elect Donald Trump's administration.
United States President Joe Biden has announced a historic clemency action, commuting the sentences of 1,500 individuals. They were on home confinement during the coronavirus pandemic. The president is also pardoning 39 people convicted of nonviolent offenses. This unprecedented clemency decision is the largest single-day act of its kind in modern United States history. In addition to this, Joe Biden is considering preemptive pardons for individuals who may face retribution under the incoming Donald Trump administration. These potential pardons could protect figures like Dr. Anthony Fauci, a key player in the U.S. response to the coronavirus pandemic, and others who might be targeted by politically motivated investigations. Biden's team is deliberating over issuing these pardons even before charges have been filed, a move that would set a significant precedent. The discussion around preemptive pardons also comes in the context of Joe Biden's recent decision to pardon his son, Hunter Biden, for federal thugs and gun violations. Hunter Biden's legal troubles had drawn attention, and the president's pardon extends not only to those offenses but to any potential future charges. Biden's decision is viewed as a protective measure against possible legal action from the Trump administration. While the pardoning power is a constitutional right of the president, some analysts argue that Biden's potential preemptive pardons are a unique and controversial use of this authority, raising questions about its implications for the future administrations.
A new report from the French political group La France Insoumise has raised serious questions about President Emmanuel Macron's handling of New Caledonia. It highlights alleged marginalization of the Kanak people, accusations of neo-colonialism, and violent unrest following controversial government actions. Here is the story.
Clashes in New Caledonia earlier this year have drawn the ire of the far-left French opposition group La France Insoumise. At the centre of the controversy is a bill passed in April proposing changes to the electoral body for local and congressional elections in the territory. The report accuses the Macron government of pushing the bill through Parliament and the Senate in a way that disregards the historical sensitivities of New Caledonia's status as a French territory. While the territory voted to remain part of France in a series of referendums, the proposed changes are seen by some as marginalising the Kanak people and threatening their cultural and political identity. The report describes the move as a form of neo-colonialism. La France Insoumise, or LFI, has linked the implementation of the bill with blockades and violent clashes between independence activists, militias and police in New Caledonia. The report suggests that 13 people died during the unrest, with at least 8 believed to be Kanak, allegedly killed by militias. It also accuses the French government of failing to disarm these groups and exacerbating tensions, which it says raised fears of further unrest. LFI criticizes the government for suspending the bill on the heels of the dissolution of Parliament, arguing that it should have been fully withdrawn and calling it a sword of Damocles hanging over the local population, creating prolonged uncertainty and unrest. The UN has expressed concern over the situation, pointing to a lack of dialogue, excessive use of force, and reports of human rights violations. Observers warn that the ongoing tensions could further destabilize the region. The French government has defended its actions, citing exceptional circumstances to legally justify measures such as the suspension of TikTok and other perceived restrictions on freedoms. However, LFI's report claims that investigations into the violence show disproportionate targeting of independentists. There are now renewed calls for greater accountability and fresh talks to address the Kanak people's concerns and ensure stability in the region.
Tuvalu's fight to survive climate change is taking center stage at the International Court of Justice. Representatives warn the island nation will face catastrophic consequences unless urgent global action is taken.
At the International Court of Justice in the Netherlands, Tuvalu's leaders made an emotional appeal for the nation's survival. Rising sea levels threaten to render the island uninhabitable, forcing its more than 10,000 residents to leave their homeland.
Tuvalu, my country and my home, is expected to be the first country to be completely lost to climate-related sea level rise.
Salt water is already contaminating farmland and aquifers, devastating health and livelihoods. Tuvalu's Attorney General, Jane Italeli Talia, calls for immediate global action.
The only way to prevent catastrophic levels of climate change is our states to implement immediate, rapid, and dramatic reductions in GHGs.
Tuvalu also highlighted the violation of their fundamental right to self-determination and urged the court to hold major polluters accountable.
The General Assembly found Tuvalu is facing our greatest challenge in the history of our people.
The hearings, set to conclude today, could mark a turning point in the fight for justice for nations on the front lines of climate change.
Is not limited to physical.
Protests have intensified across South Korea as President Yoon Suk-yeol defends his controversial martial law declaration, vowing to fight against impeachment efforts. With a second vote on his removal set for this weekend, demonstrators are clashing with police, demanding his resignation.
The protests sparked by President Yoon Suk-yeol's controversial declaration of martial law drew around 60,000 people near the National Assembly, with smaller demonstrations also taking place in downtown areas.
The President Yoon Suk-yeol is not acknowledging his own mistakes and shamelessly keeping his stance, and that made me very angry.
Protesters, primarily from local workers' unions, clashed with police as they tried to march toward Yoon's official residence. Despite heavy police resistance, many managed to slip past barricades and disrupt traffic in the area. Here we are on the sidewalk and the police are blocking our way. We tried to pass through here and the police pulled me, so I almost fell down. This is a violent situation and they cannot block us like this. Yoon is facing a second impeachment vote in parliament on December 14, following a failed attempt the previous week after the ruling party boycotted the vote. If the vote passes, the case will be sent to South Korea's constitutional court, which has up to 6 months to rule on whether Yoon should be removed from office.
A second impeachment bill against President Yoon Suk-yeol has been jointly proposed. This impeachment bill was submitted on the grounds of serious violations of the Constitution and laws, citing the President's unconstitutional and unlawful declaration of martial law and his role as the leader of a treacherous act.
The president is also under criminal investigation for his martial law declaration, which has rescinded shortly after it was announced. Yoon has pledged to fight to the end against the vote to oust him.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan reaffirmed Turkey's commitment to the territorial integrity and unity of Syria during a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Ankara. The discussions between Turkish President and U.S. Secretary of State covered bilateral relations, developments in Syria, and broader global and regional issues. President Erdogan emphasized Turkey's intention to take preventive measures against terrorist organizations operating in Syria, including the PKK, YPG terror group, and ISIS. He also called for international cooperation to rebuild and revive Syria's institutions. Secretary Blinken noted the importance of facilitating the flow of humanitarian assistance to all in need and emphasized that displaced Syrians will continue to need protection. He also discussed the urgent need to conclude a ceasefire agreement in Gaza. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has welcomed the signing of the Ankara Declaration between Ethiopia and Somalia. He thanked Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan for his efforts in bringing the two leaders together to facilitate the agreement. In a statement, Guterres praised Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud and Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed for their commitment to resolving disputes through friendship and mutual respect. The Secretary-General also expressed hope for successful technical negotiations and positive outcomes from the process. In a business and innovation, a prominent tech entrepreneur, Elon Musk, continues to make headlines with his achievements. His fortune is now very close to $500 billion. Musk's ventures are seeing significant growth, driven by market confidence and strategic moves.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk's net worth surpassed $400 billion, according to the Forbes real-time billionaires list. The milestone was driven by a 71% surge in Tesla's shares this year and the rising valuation of his rocket company, SpaceX. Musk, Tesla's largest shareholder, saw the automaker's shares hit a record $425 on Wednesday, continuing a rally that began after the November 5th election. Musk reportedly spent over $250 million to support Trump's election. His wealth was further boosted by a SpaceX insider share sale, where Musk and investors agreed to buy up to $1.25 billion in common shares, Bloomberg reported. Musk noted on X that almost no investors wanted to sell shares, even at a $350 billion valuation. He added that SpaceX reduced its share buyback from employees to attract new investors. Beyond Tesla, Musk leads Neuralink, a brain tech startup, and SpaceX, both of which depend heavily on government policies. Musk also owns social media platform X and The Boring Company, a tunnel construction firm.
Well, that's all we have for this hour. You can also get latest news and headlines around the clock on our website, that is anews.tv. Thank you for watching, and also we wish you a good day ahead.